Welcome to the Build to Rent show. Steve Olson here with Sherida Zanger, recording another episode for you as we continue to go through lease-up in a whole bunch of different projects in a whole bunch of different states. So we have some things that we're thinking about that we wanted to share with you. But remember, always subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. Sherida, as we go through lease-up in a whole bunch of different developments in a few different states, it can be an interesting process because this is where it's stressful. You've done nothing but spend money up into this point, and wow, are you ready to have some revenue coming in? Because you probably got a construction loan, you put money down, you've paid taxes, you've paid a bunch of fees, and now these units are looking like they're completed. You're almost to the finish line, but not quite yet. What do you usually see once leasing starts? What are things you hear from investors, things you've experienced yourself? What do you think?
So I think if you're at the beginning of a project, they usually start advertising about, I would say 30 to 60 days before completion. And obviously they're keeping in touch with the builder saying, hey, when do you expect this to be completed? So they're going to start advertising. But I think sometimes it's a slow ramp up and other times it's not. I know like in Arizona, for example, right now, our Village on Greenway project, I was meeting with property management and they already have quite a few people that have shown interest in that project. So, I mean, again, it depends on how much marketing they've done, but I think that it's going to take a little bit of time to get people in those units. And again, it depends on when the season is. Another thing that he showed me was that they had most interest in Arizona in October. So think about it. Like it started to rise September-ish, and then October was the peak. And part of that is nobody's going to go looking for a place to rent in July in Arizona, right? Mm-hmm. Now, our leasing season in Utah starts picking up usually in the spring because the weather gets a little bit nicer. No one wants to go look at homes or rental properties and try to lease something up with snow and rain.
Yeah, they don't want to carry couches through the snow. So
again, be aware of what that is. If you could try to have your construction ending at a right time, that would be perfect. We can't ever figure that out. That won't work for us just because there's delays and things that are out of our control. And we do this in phasing, right? Yeah. We're not trying to get something done, a whole project done at the same time. But you have to be patient and you have to know, hey, they may get just the rents that they got that are based on the pro forma. And sometimes if it's a crappy rental season, they may have to do some kind of an incentive to get somebody in the door. I mean, I know they've offered $100 off your first month's rent or half off of your first month's rent. Again, it depends on the market. They kind of fill it out and see what they can do or can't do. I know for me personally, like in Idaho, I was one of the first ones done in our project and my units got leased up. That was great. I think I had one lease signed the first month and one lease signed the second month. So there wasn't any, I wasn't panicking by any means. But now I'm getting ready for renewals to come up. And when I was talking to property management, they said, hey, plan on your leases going up between $200 and $300 a month each unit, which is huge, right?
I should have got one in there.
So I think they're also saying, when we're doing renewals, we're going to try to get top dollar. So I think they're trying to get top dollar at the beginning, but I think the biggest gripe or concern is how long is it going to take? And we don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. We tell people plan on 6 months. We talked in the last episode kind of about having a reserve account that you set aside and you say, hey, this is going to cover my HOA, my insurance, and my mortgage. So I plan for that, but be a little bit flexible and just know, hey, it's not going to get leased up right away. And I'm talking in a bigger project, one of our projects that multiple people own in, right? Mm-hmm. Again, I think if you go back to the apartment, like you were talking, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you sign 15 leases in a week, that's great because everyone gets a little portion of that or a share or there's one owner. Yeah. Or if you own just a single unit, a duplex or something, that may be a little bit different. I mean, you'd still need a plan for something, but
it's really useful to, on the front end before any of this is happening, is to look at the city records and how many units are planned.
Yep.
Right. What else is coming? So put yourself in the shoes of a tenant 12 months from now. What exists currently on the market? What's the vacancy rate like? I think that the general consensus that is if your vacancy is 5% or lower, the market wants more units.
Yep.
Right? It's begging for it. That commonly referred to as absorption rate. How many units are absorbed? So there's the normal market where we have no new units on the market. How many units are turning over and absorbing? And then if you have demand above and beyond that, that signals, hey, this market needs units. You should build here. So if you blew it on that, and we have before, and you built units in a market with a higher vacancy rate or where the absorption was just mediocre,
or not the right product type,
we've done that one for sure, then you're going to have a rockier lease up. You're going to have more aggressive incentives. It's going to just take longer. It's going to be more painful. But if you tracked it right and you brought a product that's really in demand in a market where there's negative absorption, positive rather, you have more people wanting units than exist, you could probably expect a pretty quick lease up.
Yeah.
And actually, you and I need to talk about this later today. I just got back some financial models from my underwriter on a couple of properties in Arizona. And one thing that we're projecting in the very front end of these things is our lease up rate. So when it's done, and so we've got like 80 doors, 20 doors are going to be done in 12 months, 20 doors in 14 months. What's our lease up rate? And I think we've got like 7 or 8 a month targeted in there. And so we can back into that with, okay, what's our debt service like? What are our expenses like? And as our lease up trajectory comes to pass here and we start getting revenue, we can accurately project, it's often called in your sources and your uses, we can accurately project how much money we really need to raise to operate. Because the worst thing to do is go to investors and say, we need more money.
Yeah.
That's terrible, right?
Like that.
So, and this is on a syndication project, but you can model that in on the front end if you take the time to see what kind of units are planned and what's coming. And that's not always easy.
But I think you're doing it conservatively too. I think that's the other thing. Be conservative. Don't be aggressive with your numbers, right? Because you'd rather underpromise and overdeliver. And so it's like, for me, for example, I'm going to be tickled pink when I get these leases renewed, even if the lease is $100 or $200 more a month. If he can get $300, sweet. I mean, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
But I know it's going up because everywhere else is, and that's what the market is demanding right now. But it's one of those things that just do something conservative.
Yeah. And you have a reason to think it's going to continue to at least stay level or go up because you can see the supply that's coming and what an acute need there is for housing in that market. Some people have very strong opinions about how to put this into your financial models. Like, let's say you've got some units that are having a little bit of trouble leasing up. Do you slash the rent or do you give away free rent? And some people have, because you can kind of fudge your net operating income and your internal rate of return because, well, if my rent is lower over a longer period of time, that's worse than if I just took it in the shorts and said, here's a month and a half of free rent to try to draw people out.
I mean, I think you could just model that out and figure out what's worth. I mean,
what's your investor's goal? I mean, people have strong opinions. Some are going to say, you idiot, there is a right way to do it. Okay, I get that. But there's definitely a couple of schools of thought on it. Like, do you want velocity on your leasing, right? Is your objective, hey, look, I'm going to take lower rent on the front end. I'm going to get this sucker leased up. Or is your objective, no, I want to get the highest NOI possible. But remember, it's if you're not getting rents, but you get higher rents in the future, that's a lot of expenses that were not offset by income.
Right up front. Yeah. And I think when maybe you don't want those or can't afford those, if you don't have some kind of a kitty set aside to help you pay for that, then that's going to be really hard. I know some people are like, hey, I just want a warm body in my unit, right? And so property management is really strict with how they're going through and vetting, tenants. And so I think sometimes that comes as a pinch point to people because they say, hey, well, how many applications do you have? And if we say, property management had 100 applications, but they only approved 25 of them or whatever. Well, why not the others? Well, a couple reasons. One, they could have 100 applications, but if Steve, you and I were applying to live in a unit together, right, we would be 2 applications.
That's right.
So that number really, you probably want to cut it in half. But anyone that's over the age of 18 is going to have to do that. But again, if they don't qualify, they don't qualify. The worst thing you want is for a tenant to come in and trash your unit. And I'm dealing with that right now on one of my owners up in Idaho. Tenants moved in. They were there probably 6 months, and then they vacated early. They left in December and the unit was thrashed. And they had a deposit, so obviously their deposit will kick in and they'll use all of that. And then property management's going to pursue them for the rest of the damages. Like they're having to replace all the carpet in this unit that it literally is 6 months old.
It's a brand new unit.
Brand new.
Disgusting.
So, again, and I know they did a good job with vetting them, and I don't know what the circumstances were. And so it'd be interesting. I think I probably need to make a call and just say, hey, were there any red flags? Was there something that you saw? Obviously, they got through all of their screening, but be cautious of that too. Like, don't just put a warm body in your unit so you can have money, because it may cost you more in the long run.
Oh, we're dealing with that, a big headache on that in Texas right now. And this is like the last episode we did about CC&Rs. This is one that got away from us. And you have a couple of different cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. And that's the problem, is when you're trying to qualify good tenants and do a good job leasing up, but somebody else is letting in riffraff, it makes it that much harder to do your job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, that's why we like one management company.
Yeah, that's right.
In our projects. Because they follow
one
rule. If you're managing and I'm managing, we may have different, barrier to enter, and that's why we're getting issues in Texas right now.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely. So a good management company is going to help you determine the right amount of deposits and credit scores and qualifications, and sometimes you might need to tweak some of those depending on your level of risk and what you're willing to do. But that lease-up process, you got to be patient, but you can model it on the front end. We recommend that you get with brokers and property managers and look at average days on market. But you're obviously going to greatly surpass that stuff when you go through initial stabilization on a new construction.
Yeah.
Because even if you've got a good absorption rate that is going to make your project do well, it takes time for the market to digest those new units.
Well, you're dumping a bunch of inventory in one location and hoping that absorbs really quick. Well, it's not going to be overnight. I mean, it's not going to be in 30 days. And again, back to kind of with parts of our projects being under construction, that may deter some tenants from not wanting to move in. We wish we could have our clubhouse and everything done at the beginning, but we have not figured that piece out yet.
Always arguing about that one.
Yeah.
Well, anything else before we break it off?
No, I think that's good.
Everybody, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time on the Build to Rent Show.
Thanks for listening to the Build to Rent podcast. You are now just a few clicks away from joining our community of Build to Rent investors. All you have to do is follow our show on Facebook, LinkedIn, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can also watch this episode and more by subscribing to the Build to Rent podcast on YouTube. The information presented in this podcast is general in nature. Nothing in this presentation should be construed as financial advice or recommendations for any particular situation. The hosts are only licensed to provide advice and services in the states where they are specifically licensed, and listeners should seek the advice from an appropriately licensed professional in the area where they invest. The examples presented in this presentation are for illustration only, and no guarantee that similar results can be achieved, since the facts, circumstances, and participants are all different.